It's been 6 years of podcasting, and without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to bring these podcasts to you. So I want to thank today's sponsors. And first off, we have the Pretentious Pickle Company of 190 Water Street in Plymouth. If you haven't had a chance to get down there, go down and check out what they make. They have everything pickled you can imagine, from pickled beets to carrots to mushrooms to onions to Brussels sprouts and cauliflower. They even have pickled or pickled flavor cotton candy, I should say. They make it fresh there every day, and you can go in there and check out what they have to offer. And if you're not in the Plymouth area, you can go to pretentiouspickle.com and check out what they have to offer there as well, and they will ship it out to you. Their stuff is delicious. You should check it out, and they are big fans of ours, and we are big fans of theirs. So thank you to the Pretentious Pickle Company for sponsoring today's episode. And our second sponsor today is Moonrise Cinemas. Moonrise Cinemas is a new drive-in in Plymouth. Right on the Plymouth-Kingston line. They are located at 428 Court Street in Plymouth, Mass. And they offer a great selection of movies. You can go. It's very family-friendly. I went and checked out the Goonies there. They've had Marvel movies, a wide variety of stuff. And they're really starting to expand. They have had the Rocky Horror Picture Show this coming year. They're doing music on Thursday nights. On Wednesdays are going to be 420 friendly events. So make sure you check out what they have to offer. MoonriseCinemas.com. It's a great venue. They have a beer garden. They have their own food. Their food's phenomenal. And they're bringing back their French toast, which I'm very excited about. So make sure you check out what they have to offer, MoonriseCinemas.com. And if you use code Inebri-art when purchasing tickets, you'll get 10% off. So make sure you go to MoonriseCinemas.com to get your tickets for movies, concerts, and more, and use code Inebri-art for 10% off on your purchase. And now let's jump right into the podcast. Welcome back, Inebri-ites. This is Andy of the Inebri-art podcast, as always. And not too long ago, we had a comic book artist by the name of Kit Buss on, best known for her Critical Role work. And she mentioned a super top secret Kickstarter that she was working on that she wasn't allowed to talk about. And I did a little detective work. And by that, I mean the comic creator messaged me on Twitter. And so I'm joined today by that comic creator, Brenton Lengel?
Yeah, Brenton Lengel, but Brent to my friend.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Brenton.
so you can call me Brent. That's all right.
Welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I love.
And first off, thanks for listening. It's always nice when we have a listener. But so this is obviously not your first thing. So what you're doing is you have Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, a trade paperback. For people who don't know what that is, it's like a compilation of individual comics.
Yeah, it's basically like a graphic novel, but it didn't start as a graphic novel. I'm taking 4 issues of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse and smashing them together and selling it as a trade with some special art and some really cool additional stuff. So
this is not your first venture into the comic book world, but just for shits and giggles, like what is the general elevator pitch for Snow White Zombie?
Snow White Zombie Apocalypse?
I can't say it without thinking of White Zombie. That's my problem. I keep getting hung up on the title.
That is intentional.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
And I'll go into the background of that, but just as the elevator pitch, Snow White awakens to Prince Charming's kiss 28 days after the zombie apocalypse. The 7 dwarves are dead. Her prince is polyamorous, and she is dwarfed in power and experience by Rapunzel, who is best described as a kung fu warrior queen goddess. These 3 heroes must navigate both their own mounting jealousy and suspicion, in order to come together and to fight a losing battle against death itself, as Grimm's fairy tales characters rise from their graves to devour the flesh of the living.
Somehow that's still not as like dark as actual Grimm fairy tales.
Yep. Oh, that's one of the most fun things about it is like Grimm. So I do they're on top of the Swaza series. We also have a series called Reign of the Blood-Covered King, which is kind of a prequel.
Yeah.
That sort of
and
intersects
Swaza for our listeners is the Snow White zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, that's the cool kids call it Swaza.
Okay.
But yeah, so we have Reign of the Blood-Covered King, for instance. In that first issue, I was looking up like fairy tales because I always like to jump into Grimm's or other like folklore before I start working. And I found this fairy tale called the Juniper Tree, and it involves like cannibalism and reincarnation as a bird, and then talking about like the crime of cannibalism. And I'm just like, okay, so I like opened issue 1 with like a farmer singing the Juniper Tree song. It's like one of the only actual songs in fairy tales.
Yeah, it's weird. Like people don't really think about it, but there's some dark shit. I think it was the evil stepsisters like cut their toes off to try to like fit into the glass slippers or something like that. Am I remembering that right?
I think you are remembering that right. There's a lot of different versions, but yeah, a lot of the stuff is very, very dark, which just makes it fun to work with. And really, it makes it a natural thing to use for a zombie apocalypse world. You've got fairy tales like Bluebeard, which, is half fairy tale, half campfire story, which I may do something with soon. And then like later in the series, we're actually going into a place where I'm pulling from the saga of Hrolf Kraki, which is semi fairy tale / historical. Like, I
was gonna say, I've never even heard of that. Oh, it's like an Icelandic Nordic. Okay, all right.
Yeah. It's just really cool. I love where we're going with it, and I can get into that a little bit later. But yeah, so the reason it was original. Okay. So I started out as a playwright in New York, and I kind of beat my head against the wall there, working as a small-time playwright for about 10 years. The first play I ever got produced was actually Snow White Zombie, and it was written for a company called the New York Theater Experiment. They had a 24-hour play competition. So they would send out a prompt, and the writers had only a few hours to write a 10-minute play, and then it had to be found, selected, passed out to actors and directors, and put on, like actually performed within 24 hours. Lightning just struck the right spot. And I had two ideas that I wanted to go with. And it was either going to be fairy tales and zombies, or it was going to be Shakespeare and zombies. And I was like, I can't write iambic pentameter, so I'll just go with fairy tales. And yeah, I mean, the audience absolutely loved it. It got picked up by the Estro Genius Festival shortly thereafter, and we got a full, like, proper production. Won Audience's Choice Award, got extended. And then a little while later, we wound up performing like a full-length version in the Fringe, the New York International Fringe Festival in 2012. Yeah. So like, the original title was Snow White Zombie because it was playing off of Snow White Zombie. But then when I expanded it into a 2-hour play, it became Snow White Zombie : Apocalypse. And then when it became a comic, I just got rid of the colon.
So you see a lot of comics go from comics to movies now, even ones that people don't know about, like Road to Perdition and Cowboys versus Aliens.
History of Violence.
Yeah, exactly. You don't often hear plays going to comics. Like, how did you make that jump? Were you a comic fan and just felt like you could do more in a comic book?
I mean, it's sort of just like the weird type of person I am, because I started out initially wanting to be a cartoonist. And I think I decided, like, in high school that this was probably I didn't have the discipline to really get my art skills where I wanted them to be. I could have maybe done newspaper comics, but by that time it was, there's no future for newspaper cartoonists. So I was just like, okay, I'll do something more practical and study theater. So I
didn't know the definition of practical. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I got a degree in theater, started out with a concentration on acting, but I wasn't always really happy in my actor roles. Like I worked as a professional actor after college for 2 years. But it was always part of somebody else's vision. And it was a vision that I didn't almost never resonated with. Like, you know, the stuff that I've always been into my whole life are like comics, like, you know, Calvin and Hobbes and ElfQuest, and also like, you know, fantasy novels. I'm a huge fan of like Lord of the Rings, obviously. I read the Shannara series, you know. So I've always kind of been steeped in kind of fantasy worlds. And also I've, you know, sort of had a brain that worked well with comics since I had spent so much time. I actually did my own webcomic for a year called The Life Quixotic. And it was one of those like diary web comics. And I put it out on a site that I started with a label called Anti-Pants Comics. And I was up there with this guy, Eric Moore, who did a really great series called The Taily Bones, like in his college newspaper, and also did one called Youthtopia, which was very, very funny, you know, comic kind of making fun of early reality shows. It's like, let's give a bunch of high schoolers a country.
Okay.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I'm still working with him. He did one of the covers for Swaza Volume 1. But, you know, I realized sort of that I wasn't really happy as an actor. I didn't always agree with what my directors wanted to do, and I wasn't being able to be creatively fulfilled. So I ran into a bit of tragedy. A friend of mine died in his sleep at the age of 25, like went to bed one night, didn't wake up the next morning. And as a result of that, my life went into a tailspin. I sort of dealt with it by hiking the Appalachian Trail, Maine to Georgia. So I lived in the woods for 6 months and carried everything on my back. And then, you know, as soon as I got out of the woods, I was like, you know, okay, so this acting thing, it's fun, but my real talent is writing. And so when I went to New York, I just immediately went 100% playwright. And it really paid off. I became the playwright in residence for a company called State of Play Productions, Inc. In fact, Prince Charming, because they produced one of the two earliest productions of Snow White Zombie. Prince Charming is actually, like, if you look at the actor Adam Lafaci and you look at the Prince Charming as he's drawn in the comics, it's him.
Oh, okay,
yeah. So, and he's been a huge champion of the series since like the very beginning. So yeah, I mean, I started writing in New York. I got some decent success pretty early. I wrote a play called North to Maine, which is the first play ever about the Appalachian Trail, written by me, a 2,000 miler. And that got produced twice in Manhattan, and actually was supported by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, which is the nonprofit that oversees that. I got a bunch of corporate sponsors on it, like EMS and REI.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, we needed a lot of equipment for the stage. Yeah. So I did that. I did Snow White Zombie Apocalypse. I did a play called Mike, about the New York City underground open mic scene. Very much like a little like Rent, but but not a musical. As you know, my career continued to grow, I realized that, oh, there is no money at all in theater. So I shifted my focus to screenwriting. Started working at a place called Jacob Kruger Studios, which is phenomenal. Jacob's an Emmy Award winner, and he had me working with, like, I learned comedy from a guy who used to work on Married with Children. I learned action from I learned action from a guy named George Straighton, who was one of the original writers for Xena and Hercules. And I learned drama from a former HBO exec, Stephen Moulton. While I was there, I essentially took a lot of my plays and adapted them into screenplays. And I also wrote an original screenplay, which is Daruti, Shadow of the People. And so, like, I had all of this writing, but, you know, where things were going with theater, you would expend all of this money and time and effort, and you would get this play on, and then it'd play for like 2 weeks. And if nobody saw it, like, you know, you would get people in, you'd get good reviews, but by the end of it, all you had left were like pictures and reviews and, you know, a handful of people who would come out to see theater regularly. So it's looking for a new way to work. And I happened to bump into a guy who was involved in the comics world. And I was like, oh man, I had it in the back of my head that I wanted Snow White Zombie to be a comic book.
Yeah.
I thought that it would adapt to that, format very well. And he kind of introduced me to some artists, and I found my great first artist, Hyondo Park. And then he and I produced the very first Snow White Zombie Apocalypse issue 1, which was like a 44-page double issue. And we wound up, I went to New York Comic Con and pitched everybody, and found a company called Scout Comics. And Brendan Deneen, the guy who runs it's a great guy. He took one look at like the art and the cover and was just like, I want it.
Nice.
So yeah, they were really excited about it. We signed with them. They got Snow White Zombie Apocalypse #1 into stores nationwide. And then I kind of got to a point where, it was really great that the comic was out and I was making a little bit of money off of it, but COVID had just hit and stuff,
COVID derailed everybody. Yeah.
Yep. Well, in my case, it actually kind of hypercharged me because I started my own label, Autonomous Collective, which is the same as my theater label. And we started raising money on Kickstarter to finance the production of future books. And I found another artist, Luana Vecchio, and we did issues 2 to 4. And then I'm changing artists again. The idea, like, I assume you've read Sandman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like in Sandman, the art continuously changes. He's switching artists, and that works for dreams because like dreams are they're weird and they change. And similarly, like fairy tales are weird like dreams. You hear multiple retellings, there's multiple versions. So I always felt that it was a great idea to sort of switch artists with every major like story section. So the first comic is,
it actually makes me think of there was a documentary about Graham Chapman from
Monty
Python. And the whole thing was animated, but like each section of his life was by a different animator. It was really like just a phenomenal.
Yeah. I think it's really cool. I think mashups just in general are a great way to work. And Monty Python's actually a huge influence on me. There are numerous Python references throughout the book. And in fact, Autonomous Collective is a direct reference to The Political Peasant with Dennis.
Oh, nice. Remember. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah.
In fact, in issue 1 of Reign of the Blood-Covered King, hang on for just a second. Are you hearing my son is
I hear some background. Yeah, I can. It's fine. I can't.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure everybody knows I'm not murdering.
It's COVID. Everyone's used to it. Dogs and phones and whatever.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, my wife is up there with him, so I'm not just leaving him to cry.
Nice. 3, you said?
Yeah, he's 3 years old.
Oh, nice. Mine are just turning 18 and 20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a weird experience. Yeah.
Yeah, you're on the other end of the spectrum there.
For sure. Yeah.
So like I mean, if you look at even there's a Python reference I think in issue in issue 3, and another Python reference in at the very beginning of Reign of the Blood-Covered King. Like the peasant is named Dennis,
and
nice. And the king is up there and he's going over the story of everything that happened, and the peasant's like, Dennis, and the king is like, I didn't know you were called Dennis.
Yeah. Nice.
So yeah, it's really fun. I can have a lot of fun with this series because in one way it's like the sort of fun, dark, high fantasy concept that I really, really love, but also like the premise of zombies and fairy, it's inherently ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I can also have a lot of fun with it. And I'm like a big fan of like those little 6-person jokes that really reward a reader for being well-read. The Simpsons does it really well, where there's
kind of inside jokes that I mean, people now call them Easter eggs, but yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm really curious about your trip on the Appalachian Trail, because you actually made me think of an experience in my life. Where, and I love how you walked the Appalachian Trail for months, and I'm talking about a 1-mile walk because I'm a fat nerd. So
hike your own hike, and we've all put on a bit of weight with COVID.
Yeah, but I was working like a crappy retail gig. and I was middle management, and they were really pushing me to take like an assistant manager role. And it was like, it was, not like millions of dollars, but it would have changed my life quite significantly with the boost in income. And for weeks I was miserable. I was miserable. I was unhappy. I was cranky. And I had car trouble that day, and I had to walk from work to home, which was about a mile. And I threw on some headphones and I put some music on. And through that walk, like, I went through this realization that the money didn't matter to me, that I didn't want to do that job, that if I did that job, Inebri-art would probably cease to be. And it felt like by the time I got home, my mood had changed so much, and like was a weight lifted off of me, because I'm like, I don't want to, like, it was that kind of social, like, you need to do this, and then I'm like, no, I don't. Like, let me do my thing my way. I mean, am I summing up your Appalachian Trail trip in a 1 mile walk?
Yeah, you in a way you really are. I've actually, in college, I guarantee you this connects with what you just said, but
yeah, sure.
In college, Mo Rocca of The Daily Show.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And he was pushing a book that he'd just written about, like, the president's pets. I was in the audience, and they were polling, like, the audience for who wants to ask questions. And so I kind of stood up and I said, like, how do I get on The Daily Show? And he kind of pushed it. He was like, I don't know, become Jon Stewart's bitch or something. Yeah. So after that, I went up to get my copy of the book signed. I'm like, hey, I'm the guy that asked you that stupid question about how I got on The Daily Show. And he kind of looked at me for a second. He goes, the reason I got this job on The Daily Show was that I just got it into my head that I was going to go around the entire country and just take pictures of myself at the graves of obscure and unremembered U.S. presidents. And I can't get into it right now, but that directly led to The Daily Show. So I guess my advice to you is, if you've got something crazy you want to do, go do it. And I've kind of lived my life by that motto. And it is really, I with your 1 mile walk, there's a level of zen that comes on when you're doing that, when you're actually going somewhere, and it can really put your life into stark relief. So yeah, I think that absolutely connects with, like, everything that through hikers do. So yeah, I feel you.
Was there, like, do you remember the spot on the Appalachian Trail where it kind of came into that focus? Was it like a significant spot, or was it just kind of like at the end, you looking back?
I think the most significant experience I had on the Appalachian Trail, I had a lot. I hiked through a tornado, unknowing. I was running across the top of, like, the White Mountains during a thunderstorm, ran into bear and moose and all that kind of stuff. But I think, like, the most, it wasn't where you would expect it. I was hiking through Virginia. Don't remember exactly where. I think this was Southern Virginia. And I just found myself walking through a field with the sun coming up. And I looked to my right, and suddenly I was like, I'm not sad anymore. Like, a huge weight had been lifted off me, that I'd been depressed for so long. I didn't even realize I was depressed. It was just there. And the clouds, like, parted and it blew away. And suddenly, like, my entire life changed, like, in that moment. So I think that there were a number of kind of epiphanies like that. I think the trail is just a great place for anybody who's looking to figure out their life, to go. And, on top of that, you get some great views and meet some amazing people.
It's great. Like, I love those moments in life where you kind of, things seem like hyper focused, and it usually comes off of the tail end of something tragic. Where, bad breakup, loss of a loved one, whatever. And I remember my father passed 17 years ago, give or take a few months. And it was right around this time of the year where, at that point after he passed, I realized, I'm like, what am I waiting for? Like, I have things I want to do. I need to do them. And I opened up a comic book shop.
Awesome.
Ran for a few years. I got divorced and went away. But it's those kind of moments where you're kind of like, you're only here once, and why live with regrets? Like, why, just so like, I think it's that stuff fascinates me.
It's very interesting. So one of my favorite philosophers is Alan Watts. I don't know if you've encountered his philosophy before. Look it up on YouTube. Great to fall asleep to, by the way.
Okay.
Brilliant, British guy. And he made a career out of essentially, he was a minister in the Church of England, the Anglicans, I think. And then he went to Asia and studied with the Zen Buddhists. And he sort of came back and made a career from the 50s to the late 60s, explaining Buddhism and Taoism and stuff in terms that Americans could understand. That if you didn't have this cultural background, you could understand these ancient practices. And one of my favorite things that he said was that if you spend your life thinking that wanting money primarily, instead of doing what you would really enjoy spending your time at, you will be completely wasting your time, which is you will be doing things you don't like doing. Yep. In order to go on doing things you don't like doing, and to teach your children to do the same thing. So really, I think the phrase is it's all wretch and no vomit. You never actually get there.
Yep.
And that's what leads to a lot of midlife crises and stuff where people have realized I was going after this thing that wasn't really me, that I didn't really want to do. And so what? I got a bunch of money now and I got some property and I'm miserable.
Yeah, for sure. And you see it all the time is, sometimes you run into people and they have quote unquote everything and, they're drinking themselves to death or they commit suicide or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, it's now I'm going to have to try to paraphrase myself because this was forever ago, but I interviewed a band out of LA called Broken Baby. Mm-hmm. And I believe because we were talking about the people who oh, someday I'll travel and someday I'll do this. And I'm like, someday now I'm trying to remember. It was someday never arrives or something along those lines. And, mm-hmm. If you're, you just need to rip the Band-Aid off and just do it. Mm-hmm. If you have, it's such a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. Because I see people all the time being oh, I want to write this, or I want to open a business, or I want to start a restaurant or whatever. And, there's no time like the present. You need to do mm-hmm. it now. But in the same aspect, not everyone should do it. Because I see time and time again where people oh, I want to do this. Oh, it's really hard. I'm like, yeah, man. Yeah, it's super hard. Mm-hmm. How do you I don't know your family background. Mine were relatively supportive of me being a creative type. But how did you run into that? When you were studying theater where they're you need a backup. I hate
the backup, the plan B. I sort of, not as much as I could have. My parents, for the most part, have been very supportive, but I did get some pushback. I remember I graduated with my theater degree, and my dad was not behind me getting a theater degree. Yeah. I went from that to an audition. I actually jumped in my car and drove all the way to St. Louis with a friend of mine, and I auditioned at this big theater conference. And I was really scared because I was somewhat of a persona non grata in my mm-hmm. theater department. I think it was just because I was a little different than they were. And, also I probably was a little shit at the time. But
I never grew out of that. I'm still a shit. So
yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah. So I had a lot of difficulty getting cast in things. In fact, that's actually why oddly enough, it really helped me in my career later on, because I learned how to do everything for myself because nobody gave me anything. Yeah. And so I went to this audition. I got 4 job offers. And this was the first time people were really responding to me as an actor. Mm-hmm. And so I came home and I was at home talking to my dad, and I was like, hey, I got this job offer and this job offer, and this one pays this and this one pays this. And I'm really kind of wondering what I should do. And he just looks across the table and is like, you should join the Navy. And that just crushed me at the time. Especially since my dad had been in the Navy, and he hated it when he was in it. but then like in retrospect, he loved it.
Yeah, it's weird, like that kind of nostalgia of torture,
Yeah.
that people have, like, oh, it's fucking terrible, blah, 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 you should do it. I'm like, no.
Why would I want to do
Why would
that?
I do that? Yeah. If it tastes terrible, don't offer me a taste. Like, it's not what I want. So it's very, are you cognizant of that sort of thing now that you have a 3-year-old? And granted, your 3-year-old's not like planning a career, but me personally, I've been very like, I think when I had my kids, I spent a lot of time thinking about the things that upset me as a kid and tried not to do them as a parent. Like, have you started thinking of those type of things? And what if your kid wants to join the Navy?
So it's very interesting with me because I am heavily anti-authoritarian. If that's
oh my god, a creative person that doesn't like authority.
Yeah.
Shocking.
I mean, I wrote an entire comic series about like Spanish anarchists. So
yeah.
But like, so I'm more excited to see my son like develop in his own way. I kind of can't wait for him to sort of rebel against me. I think
so this is the interesting thing is like, if they're going to rebel against you, he could very much be like, no, law and order. And, Trump's a good guy.
Well, I hope that Donald Trump will not be around when my, son, but yeah. I mean, he might. My dad was a Republican, and I rebelled against him, though also he was ready to vote for Bernie Sanders before Hillary squeezed him out in 2016. Yeah. And I think there were a lot of people like that. But, it was really interesting because so there's a couple of other things that I do. I also do political debates on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Like usually against some very far right people. And I just had a debate with a guy by the name of I like him personally, but nobody looked that up. Like,
yeah.
In fact, why don't you bleep me?
All right, we'll have the editor do that.
Yeah, but anyway, like during the debate, he said a number of wild things, but one of them was he was like, the thing that should happen is the father should get the children in the divorce, so that the father can make them into the right kind of person. And at the time, I just like. I'm a big fan of Khalil Gibran, and he's got this poem on children. Are you familiar with The Prophet? And phenomenal, just incredible poet. I lived in I think the 30s. I was given a copy of it 2016-ish and just really absorbed everything. But his poem on children is the whole book is set up in such a way that it's like a prophet, kind of a Christ-like figure, is leaving this city, and all the people from the city come out to ask him questions. And it's sort of a Sermon on the Mount kind of thing, but there's also the implication that he's dying.
Yeah.
So we have here on children, and a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, "Speak to us of children. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backwards, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite and bends you with his might. Let that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. For even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves the bow that is stable."
No, I mean, I'm not a poetry person, but I really, really like that because it's very much kind of how I have, I don't think of them as my kids. I think of them as I'm like their guide, I suppose.
Yeah. It's stewardship rather than ownership.
Yes, for sure. And I'm here to be like, hey man, I think, you might want to reconsider that. And be like, nope, I'm doing it. I'm like, all right, man. I'm here when you fuck up, but and and even when they're real little, like I really wanted them to have agency on their life, like I don't want to dictate what they should be doing or they should be thinking. And, I express my opinion and explain to them the opinion of other people. And I'm a weekend dad, so by all means take that and with a grain of salt. But, they've turned out to be way better people than I am.
Well, that's the dream. That's the dream of every parent, that your children are better than you. Yeah. So, I've been doing Snow White Zombie for a while. And the plot, deals with kung fu and zombie. It's like kung fu, like 70s kung fu, and zombie fairy tales mashed up with like dark fantasy, and with a side of blood, sex, and gender politics. And I'm about halfway through the original play now. I'm switching to a new artist, which isn't Kit, by the way. Our secret project has yet to be announced.
Oh, okay.
Yes, though she is doing a short series for this graphic novel that I'm releasing.
I was going to say,
now.
she was in the video, or you mentioned her in the video. So
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, her and Ralph Singh, who works for Scout Comics, both of them are going to be doing a 10 pages each, 6 to 10 pages each, within the Swaza universe, which I'm really excited about. Our other project will be announced hopefully very soon. I'm just getting it colored. So I'm working on that. I've also released, I talked about it earlier, Derrudi's Shadow of the People. This is a very different from Snow White Zombie Apocalypse. This is the life and death of Buenaventura Durruti, who was a Spanish anarchist who started out kind of as a bandit and Robin Hood figure, cut a swath of revolutionary activity across 5 countries and 2 continents, and then returned to Spain when the Spanish military went fascist, took up the defense of Barcelona and defeated the military, collectivized the entire city, and then took an army of somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 anarchists to fight Franco in Madrid. And he won his first battle and then was tragically killed under mysterious circumstances. So he's one of my personal heroes, and I'm really, really excited to see where the series is going. And I'm working with both, the artists and editors that I'm working with, but also a Spanish film company called Enon Films, and we're going to be doing a full-length version of Durruti's story from the screenplay that I wrote, which is going to be in the comics, as well as a original sort of prequel called Wanderer's Feast, which takes place in Tampico, Mexico in 1925, I believe, and features again like a real life story that has been embellished, to fit with a modern audience and like the things that people expect to see on film. So, like, all in all, I'm working on that. Another thing people might know me from is I'm gonna go out on a limb here. Have you heard of a band called the Crew Shadows?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought you might have, but that's all right if you haven't.
I haven't, but I love finding new. I make notes all the time of like stuff I should be listening to.
Okay, so if you're into geeks, get definitely Crew Shadows. So CRUX Shadows.
Oh, okay. CRUX.
Yeah, and there's an umlaut over the U.
Oh, Jesus! Thanks for helping out the dyslexic kid with making it weird. Okay.
Yeah, so like Crew Shadows. If you've never heard them before and you haven't, the best way I can describe them is imagine Lady Gaga, but Lady Gaga's a guy fronting a mostly girl goth band singing about angels in Greek mythology.
Okay. Weirdly, that made me jump to Iron Maiden.
Yeah, in a way that, I can see that.
Because Iron Maiden had very like epic story-based songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Crew Shadows definitely does. Their biggest hit is a song called Sophia, which was the #1 dance hit in the world in 2005.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The reason I thought you might know about them is they are very popular at Dragon Con, which is the biggest fantasy sci-fi convention in the world.
Oh, sure. I'm very much in the past. I was, I would hit, 30 cons a year, and now I'm down to about none.
COVID.
My life is but even before COVID, my life is just taking weird paths, and that it's part of my life that I'm like, I should get back to more. It's just I'm so busy, honestly.
Yeah, we seem to have less and less time as we get older. But yeah, so me and the lead singer, Rogue, he's actually my writing partner.
Okay.
And for the last 4 years, we have been reading our fantasy novel, which is called After All. We've been reading like one chapter as like an official event at Dragon Con each year. Not last year because of COVID, probably not this year for the same reason. But it's the series. I'm really excited about the series. It begins when the main character dies, and sort of follows her, and her name's Reddy, is a nickname, and she wakes up, realizing that she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that she believed about the afterlife is true, but also everything everyone else believes about the afterlife is true, and it's all true in the same time in the same place. So she has to kind of navigate this sprawling fantasy landscape. We're pulling a lot from The Wizard of Oz, actually. And she keeps like meeting her friends in life, but they're not her friends.
Hang on. Are you saying The Wizard of Oz, Oz is the afterlife?
It's kind of what I'm doing. It's more like we patterned the story after.
Oh, okay.
Like, yeah. So,
right.
so like, yeah. So for instance, like, one of her friends, his name is Sam. She meets him again as the historical knight Roland, Tin Man. She meets.
Okay.
Yeah.
That gives that whole, like, I never thought of it, but like girl caught in a tornado has a near-death experience. Mm-hmm. All the people that were there are there. Never really that has never crossed my mind before, and that's a really interesting way to look into that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably some fan theory out there that Dorothy is secretly dead or dying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, she meets her friend Ethan, who is Odin, the All-Father, like she encounters him hanging from a tree with freaking ravens on him, Scarecrow. And so like the story is kind of the biggest thing that I've sort of ever done, both because, I'm collaborating with an actual rock star, who's one of the most brilliant people I've ever encountered. And also just because like there is a chance to do so much with a novel that you really can't do in a play, a screenplay, or even a comic book. I mean, I think out of all of the writing types, in my opinion, I actually think comic writing is the hardest.
Really?
Oh yeah. Theater, you can have a if you are mildly creative and good at writing dialogue, you can have a career as a playwright. Like, absolutely. Because like they'll even in college, like when you're writing a play, like I started out like spelling out how I wanted everything to go and how the set should look. And like my professors were like, look, no, just write the dialogue, write whatever actions you absolutely have to write, but nothing else. And let the actors and the director do the rest of that for you. So I'm like, okay. So then I tended to give people a little bit more as a playwright, but I always gave them the freedom to do what they wanted. Then when I started doing screenwriting, the task of a screenwriter becomes basically you have to be you have to write the dialogue and the action, but you also have to kind of be the director, but you can't write it in such a way that the director thinks you're trying to be a director. So you have to like basically write the script in such a way that hints at heavily visual things that the director can then read the script and go, aha, I know exactly what this is going to be because you've put it in there. But you can't be that's a secret. If any directors want me to not do it with them, I totally won't do it with you. Yes, I will.
No, it's just interesting because in COVID I started writing a screenplay because I always have story ideas. I'm a creative person, like my brain always works. And so I am dyslexic. English is my worst subject. So I'm trying to get the story out. So I'm trying to run with no legs, really, is what's going to go on. And so it's been like really interesting. So the hardest things that I'm finding is writing dialogue for female, but that's a really interesting thing because I'm kind of at a point where it needs a montage. And I'm like, I don't even really know where to begin. Like, do you just be like, montage that does blah blah blah, and let the other person kind of like piece that shit together? Or?
No, that used to be that.
Yeah.
Like, and like if you're like George Lucas, when he was writing the prequels, he even talks about it. Like when he gets to the lightsaber battles, he's just like, they fight. But
that famous Peter Jackson moment, they cross a bridge and run down some stairs.
Yeah,
and it's like 45 minutes in the movie.
Yep. Oh jeez. And so like yeah, I mean, like, so if you were writing a montage right now, what you want to do is spell out the montage image by image, but don't like give it enough that a director feels that they're bringing their creativity to it. You also don't want to do too much, because you got to think, usually when you are first submitting a script, the director's not the one reading it. The producer's not the one reading it. It's like a board, like the first gatekeeper you have to get past is pretty much a bored film student that doesn't want to be doing this.
I had a friend that did that shit. Yeah. And he's like, so I remember a friend of mine was like, oh, I used to read scripts as an internship. And I'm like, oh, that sounds terrible. He goes, yeah, it was really bad. And he recommended 2 movies the entire time. And he recommended movies so infrequently that every time he recommended a movie, they'd bring him in the office and be like, why did you recommend this? And he's like, one was really good. And he's like, the other one I looked at and was like, I mean, this is the kind of thing that you guys would make and make money on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did it become a movie? He goes, no. I'm like, did anything become a movie? He goes, yep. And I'm like, the ones you recommended? He goes, nope.
Yeah. Oh, so like, there's like weird tricks of the trade. If you actually are interested, I would actually recommend you check out writeyourscreenplay.com. That's the Jacob Kruger studio. They do a lot of stuff via streaming and the web now, and they get like real professionals to come in and work with you. I mean, like, I'm literally one of my mentors in comics now is like Ron Martz of Green Lantern. Like I'm in his comic class through Jacob Kruger Studios.
Oh, nice. So, I mean, sometimes I think I'm just trying to get an idea out of my head so I can stop thinking about it.
No,
and I say that I'll be out with friends and I'll make a joke and I'll be like, I know it's a shit joke, but it was like running in a loop, and now that I said it, it's gone. I can like move on.
You discharged it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
by the way, it's interesting that you say you're dyslexic, because I actually am a little dyslexic, though not in the typical way that people usually are, from what I understand.
So I say I'm dyslexic. Initially, it started off a little jokey. So I'm terrible at spelling. Reading is not my strong point. And so my friends would give me shit. I'd be like, oh, I think I have an undiagnosed learning disorder. And I'd just like laugh it off. And then I started dating this girl. She was a school teacher. And she went to a friend of hers that was like the special ed teacher or whatever. And she's like, now what if someone's an adult who's dyslexic, what can they do to help? And her friend goes, oh, they should do word searches. Word searches really help dyslexic people. I'm like, they used to take me out of class to do word searches of my spelling words. And I'm like, holy shit. No one told me. Now I'm like convinced that they diagnosed me and just no one told me that I was dyslexic, because it was like, the early 80s, and they, there was it was a pox upon us. You have dyslexia. So I'm pretty convinced I have it. Although, I mean, I'm like,
you haven't heard it from a doctor. Yeah. I mean,
man, like I have coped.
I have ADD without the hyperactive component of it, but with like the hyperfocus and the, I saw a meme. It was like, people were like, ADD isn't like oh, squirrel. It's like oh, hey, that's a squirrel. You know what? I think I want to know more about squirrels. Oh my God, why is it 3 hours later and I've looked up squirrels and everything about squirrels on Wikipedia and I haven't done anything else?
It's a weird thing. Like I know so many people like, oh, my ADD kicked in, and another girl I dated was legit ADD to the point where like we would be having a conversation and it's almost like a memento moment where like, she'd go blank and then like walk away and be like, are we done? And she'd be like, what? And be like, I asked you a question. Be like, oh, I didn't answer you. And I'm like, no, man, you just stopped talking and walked away. So it's like people who legit ADD, it's rough, man. Like
it is, though. Also, it's not really a disorder so much as it's an inherited genetic condition. Like people who had ADD, were very useful to humans in earlier civilizations. Or the people that got bored and wandered out and found a new field, discovered new resources. But now, they want us all, sitting down, working as like clerks and doing their paperwork and everything. And that doesn't work for our brains. So I was forced to become an artist.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. And then the dyslexia thing. So I don't have dyslexia in the classical sense. Like I had a really difficult time learning to read, but once I did, just boom. And my language skills have always been off the charts. I think I was writing at the level of a college senior about to graduate in the 5th grade. But what I will do is my brain will reverse concepts. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So like the most obvious one that I've always had is I cannot do, when I mean audition, I say rehearsal. And when I mean rehearsal, I say audition. I will reverse my hundreds and my thousands, which drives my wife and my previous employers crazy.
Yeah.
So I'll go up and I'll be like, oh my God, our Kickstarter is up to $1,200. And like my wife said, 1,200. And I'm like, oh, 12,000. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of think there's definitely like coping things that we have to do, but I also think a lot of these limitations tend to be mixed, like blessings in disguise.
For sure. Yeah.
Like the only way anybody gets better is by, meeting with an obstacle, refusing to be defeated, and overcoming it usually, or finding a way to move around it. So like, the very fact that, I had such a hard time in college really made it so that I could hit the ground running in the real world. There's people, who were in my department that were given everything, and, they're not doing anything because,
the interesting thing is like dyslexia never stopped me from learning anything. Like I learn in different ways. Like I'm a visual learner. If audio, like I'll listen. If I take notes, I never read them. The reason why I did shitty in school is, I remember English senior year, the teacher said, we're having a test. You have to memorize the to be or not to be soliloquy. And he goes, there's no reason, it's just something we make the seniors do. And I went, well, I'm not doing it. Like, why would I waste the brain power on doing that? That makes no sense. And I bombed the test, but I still passed. Who cares? Like, I was like, I don't, people were like in lunch, like reading it to each other and trying to read. And I'm like, why are you wasting your time? They told you there's no purpose to it. And I'm very much like, I want to learn what I want to learn. And if in a school setting, you learn what's in the curriculum.
What they kind of force you to do. Well, also schools are usually set up to like, there's different learning styles. I'm very much a kinesthetic learner. You can show me how to do something a million times. You can tell me how to do something a million times. It will not penetrate this. The only way I learn anything is I have to literally sit down and do it. And then once I physicalize it, that's when like things really start to click. It's also just kind of weird. Okay, so have you heard of the Monty Hall problem?
Of course, I love the Monty Hall problem. That is a great, you don't understand statistics kind of thing. I'm always saying humans don't understand statistics, and the Monty Hall problem is the perfect example.
Yeah, exactly. Because people have a hard time. So for listeners who are not familiar with this, it's based on like the show Let's Make a Deal.
Yep.
And they have 3 doors. Behind one door is a new car. Behind the other 2 doors is a goat.
Yep.
And they sit, and then Monty they
pick a door. Yep.
Yeah.
And then Monty pick the door. They open, and one of the doors to show a goat.
Yeah, and then everybody was saying, so what do? Do you change your door? Does that change anything? And all these like math professors were going back and forth about it. And the smartest woman in the country at the time, Marilyn Vos Savant, has like an IQ in the 200 range apparently. She's just like, no, you switch it. You have 2/3 the chance you have a 66% chance of being right if you change. And like all these math professors like wrote her and were like, you're so stupid, you need to go back to school and learn like basic stuff. And she's like, no, here it is, and like wrote it out as an equation. And the funny thing was that like the professors looked at it and they're like, okay, I know that's right, but I can't
right, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. And I love when science is counterintuitive to the point where it breaks your brain. So because I go down YouTube rabbit holes frequently.
Well, hopefully. It depends on the rabbit holes.
I watched a video about it said, why do we keep needing new G's? I believe was the title. And in my brain, I'm like, well, because the faster you go, the more gravity you're experiencing. No. They were talking about cell phones. And they really broke down how cell phones work. And the thing that I found most interesting is, and we've all experienced this when you're traveling, if you're on the highway and you're on the phone, you shouldn't be, whatever. And your call drops because you lost signal. Your brain goes, oh, I went through a dead area with no signal. Unless you're in rural America where there is no one, if you're living in a populated area, it's more likely you had too much signal.
What, really?
Yeah. Huh. And that like you were kind of in an area where the cell towers were competing signals and your phone got confused and dropped it. And I'm like, that's crazy. That's so counterintuitive. But I love that kind of like, you would never understand that unless you're an engineer. So, well,
yeah. Well, like the thing is, like the reason I brought up Monty Hall is this relates back to my weird version of dyslexia, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
So when I first was told about the Monty Hall problem, it was like, early middle school, I think 6th grade. And I didn't know the answer. And then they told us the answer. I was like, oh yeah. Okay. And I was just like, literally like for most of my life thought about that. Like, oh, that's just a baby question that like kids tell. And then I found out it stumps all these high level math professors. And what I realized was the reason I was figuring it out was because my brain reversed the concepts. So for instance, everyone thinks of the 3 doors as a positive thing. So you have a 1/3 chance to be right when you pick a door. But if you reverse that, you have a 2/3 chance to be wrong.
Right.
So when they eliminate a wrong choice, your statistics go up because you most likely have picked the wrong door. And like, I talked to my wife, who's incredibly smart, but doesn't have the particular quirks that my brain has. And she's like, okay, I understand that. I believe you. I don't know. I can't get it.
It's one of the, I love the Monty Hall problem because when it is explained and spelled out, I'm like, I understand it 100%. And then 3 days go by and I'm like, okay, I need to go back and watch that again because I don't remember how, like, it's really complicated.
Yeah, human brains just they were not made to deal with complex sums. I mean, you can think of computers as partially a coping mechanism,
For sure.
Yeah. So overall, I'm doing. It was really great getting a chance to work with Kit. By the way,
she was so sweet.
I love really talented.
Show. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the cover she did for me, the very first one. Yeah, this is her doing the Big Bad Wolf, which is there are 2 big bad wolves that are zombie werewolves, basically. The first one being the Granny Wolf, and then the second one being the Big Bad Alpha Wolf, which is the one from the 3 Little Pigs.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And it's not the primary. So the Big Bad Wolf is basically like Darth Vader to the main villain who is still yet to be revealed's Palpatine.
Okay.
And like so she did that. I actually, the reason I reached out to her was I was packing, like I'd been aware of Critical Role for a while. Somebody had told me to really check out like the Briarwood arc, which they're doing on the TV series right now, which I'm glad they jumped straight to that because that's one of the best things about the first campaign. And like, so I was just sitting there packing like 600 comics. And so I was just like, I listened to all of my regular podcasts, gone through all of them. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to watch Critical Role, like old back episodes of Critical Role. And so I started at the beginning of the first season, and I went like through almost the whole thing while I was fulfilling these various Kickstarters. And I saw Kit play, and she was really sweet, really smart and everything. And then I saw like her designs. And so I was just like, I kind of had it, and I was like, I'm always looking for an artist to do like variant covers for me. And I was like, I'll just give it a shot. She probably won't even respond, but I'll reach out. And she like got back to me very quickly, And, we've been collaborating since then. She's, I got to tell you, I really wish I could tell you what we're working on and show it to you. Cause like, she got me the character designs back in like the first 10 pages. And
there's always off the air. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I may mention it after we get off the air. So, since then I've kind of, I've changed my focus from theater, and immediately from film. Like I'm still doing stuff with film, but it changed my focus from theater to comic books, because it is so much easier to get someone to buy a comic book than to come to your play.
Sure. Yeah. For sure.
And so in a weird way, again, like, opposition makes us better. The fact that I had to spend 10 years in Manhattan bugging the crap out of anyone and everyone to get them to come out to see North to Maine, and doing all of the publicity myself. Once, Snow White Zombie came out, I was able to hustle and continue to get it regularly funded on Kickstarter. And then also, we were able to get nominated for 2 Ringo Awards, which was really, really exciting. Yeah, it was Best Inking for Hyondo Park, and Best Production and Design for the whole team overall. That was really exciting. That's kind of been a fun distinction for the book since we came out. Other champions of the book have been, Ron Martz really loves it. He's writing the foreword for the book. David Pepos, who writes a number of things. Spencer and Locke, if you're familiar, his sort of Sin City meets Calvin and Hobbes.
Okay.
Yeah, it will kill your childhood. So, but yeah, it's Calvin as a hard-boiled grown-up detective. Like, I mean, it's not Calvin.
Yeah.
And his hallucinatory panther friend, Locke. Or maybe I had that backwards. Maybe he's Spencer and the other one's Locke. He's also written a really great series called the OZ for Wizard of Oz, but mashed up with Hurt Locker. And he just won a Ringo Award for that, which is really exciting. Awesome. So, it's been really great. I continue to work with Scout Comics. They're a terrific publisher. I've had some other people reach out to me about DeRudy as well. I may go with Scout. I may go with somebody else. Really just depends on how things shake out. At this point, sort of like the way things are going to go with my Kickstarters, I'm going to be launching. I've got my volume 1. After the volume 1 is funded, well, it is funded now, but like after that's shipped out, I'm going to be working to launch the Kickstarter for Swaza 5 and 6 with my new artist, who I'm really, really excited about. I'll tell you that off.
Okay, sure.
Then also I've got the DeRudy Shadow of the People series, the 2nd issue. I'm looking for a new artist for that. So that should hopefully be coming out really soon. And then this project with Kit, as well as Spanish versions of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse and DeRudy Shadow of the People are being done. So like overall, I'm really, really excited as to where everything is going. There's I've had some really great meetings in Spain. I guess I can announce this officially. So you may not know, you may not be familiar with this because not a lot of Americans are, but DeRudy was associated with the Spanish labor union, the CNT-FI, the Confederación Nacional de Trabajo, FI's federation Federation Iberia Anarquista, the Iberian Anarchist Federation. So Durruti's kind of like their big hero. And we reached out to the CNT and they put us in touch with the FAL, which is their publishing arm. And so they are going to be printing and distributing the Spanish language version of Durruti in Europe, and especially in Spain. Yeah. So it's really cool to just sort of come, I love how far certain things have come in the last year, year and a half or so. COVID has been so hard for everybody, but I did my best to make sure that like I spent that time in the most productive way I possibly could.
For sure. I feel like you have to come back on again because I feel like there's so much that we just barely touched on.
Dude, I'd love to.
But where can our listeners go to find out? Well, where's your Kickstarter? What's your socials? All that.
Yeah, absolutely. Plug my
crap. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if you guys want to find me, just Google my name, Brenton Lengel, Brenton Lengel. I'm literally the only one in the world. And which means I have to be careful, by the way, because I can't blame something I do on some other Brent Lengel. You can also, my website is www.brentonlengel.com. I am on Kickstarter, both as Brenton Lengel, and then my comic publishing company is on there as Autonomous Collective. If you're looking to get a copy of Durruti, you can search Durruti on Kickstarter. That is there's still a backer kit where people can order it. And if you're getting the Swaza Volume 1, you can also order Durruti Issue 1 as an add-on. Also, by the way, just I'm showing these off because they're cool. Magic coins.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. These, I put a ton of focus into them. This is Prince Charming's father, the eponymous blood-covered king. And what I love about it is a peasant found it and got pissed off and like chiseled a skull into his face.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I know the coins disappear.
It's hard to see with the green. With the green screen.
No, it's magic.
That's magic, right? Sorry. Sorry.
But I put as much like depth into like everything I put out for Swaza as I do into the book itself. Like, the back of this has like a freaking Latin phrase. It's the real life Valar Morghulis. We've got the seal of the kingdom, which features some really deep fairy tale cuts. You can search me on YouTube, Brenton Lengel. I do philosophy, art, and occasionally debates against very online weirdos. And and then of course you can occasionally find me in comic shops when Scout Comics is publishing. They will be republishing the first issue of Swaza probably in September of this year, and they'll do the rest of the issues, and then we will probably also be doing like a store-wide release of Snow White Zombie Volume 1 and beyond.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, that's where you guys can find me. Please reach out to me. I'm most active on Twitter and Facebook. And I promise not to be too argumentative.
Well, you weren't at all today.
Well, I try. It helps when you see someone's face.
Yeah.
The reason I have gotten to like semi-professionally doing debates is I started out as like a reply guy on Facebook and sort of ascended.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Best of luck on the Kickstarter. Hopefully everyone goes out and backs you on that. And I don't really have a real official, like I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, I don't have like a real good official sign off. So, go hike the Appalachian Trail or take a walk or something. That's going to be my recommendation for this time.
That is my recommendation as well.
Yeah. And we'll catch you listeners again next week.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.